Welcome to Emerging Franchise Brands, the podcast that introduces you to the visionary founders of America's fastest growing franchise opportunities. We'll also hear from industry pros as they share insights on what it really takes to achieve the elusive milestone of 100 plus locations. I am your host, Frank Fumey, founder of I9 Sports, and my 20-year journey from inception to acquisition has given me a unique perspective on how to succeed in franchising. Join me as we welcome today's guest. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. On today's show, I have two very special guests. I have Omar Soliman and Nick Friedman from College Hunks, hauling junk and moving. Guys, how are you?
Doing great.
Awesome. Thanks for having us.
It is great to have you guys. We go way back, starting here in the Tampa Bay area, and with our companies, and I'm excited to get together here with you guys.
Awesome. Yep. I remember from the early days reaching out to you, being like, what are we doing?
Exactly. I was probably asking you the same thing.
Yeah.
What year did you guys start franchising?
We started franchising in 2008.
0809, yeah.
0809. All right. That's right. Omar, you and I got together. We met in I think it was Arizona or something.
Arizona at a franchising conference, probably 2010. And we were sitting next to each other. And I was asking you a bunch of questions and taking notes. And I think I still have the notes somewhere. How many FBCs do we need per franchise and all that?
Oh my gosh. Well, guys, I think what I need to do is, before we go any further, I would love to just share with the audience a little bit about you guys, your illustrious career, because you guys have done some incredible things with your business. And I want the audience to know not just the accolades, but hear how everything started. But I'm going to give it real brief. So Nick and Omar have created this huge brand. They're best-selling authors. They've co-produced, Nick's co-produced an award-winning Netflix documentary and acted. And they've been in television programs. They've been on Shark Tank. Nick's been on Undercover Boss, right?
That's right.
So you guys have done incredible work. How many franchises do you guys have now?
We're up to just over 200 franchise owners across the U.S. and probably comprise about 400 territories.
Oh, wow. That's incredible. So I want to go back to the beginning, though. How did you guys meet?
We met in high school in 10th grade. Detention. And we're just kind of troublemakers back then, and became best friends, and then kept in touch and ended up becoming business partners.
Okay. But you got to connect the dots. So how did this whole thing happen? You guys were in high school. How did the whole business partnership come to be and the whole idea?
Yes. So summer before our senior year of college, we went to university opposite sides of the country. He was at Pomona College in California, and I was at University of Miami down in South Florida. And we would link back up during summer break. My mom had this beat up cargo van that she would use for deliveries at her furniture store, and basically offered the van to do odd jobs around the neighborhood. And I invite my buddies over, Nick and a couple other friends. We're sitting around the dinner table and came up with this harebrained idea of hauling junk. And we said, all we need is a name. And, after about 2 Bud Lights, the name started to get a little bit more creative. And my mom looked at us and she was like, you guys are like the college hunks who haul junk. Looked at each other like, that's a great name. You could feel the earth move, and put some flyers around the neighborhood that said, College Hunks will haul your junk. 6 o'clock that night, cell phone rang, and we were in business. And that's what we did. And wake up 5 a.m, work till 8, 9 o'clock at night. It was the first time in our life that we found something that we were passionate about. Not that we were necessarily passionate about hauling junk, but being a small business owner, that opened up our eyes that there was this whole other world outside of school, grades, getting a job. It's like you can run a business, you can do marketing and talk to clients, and every day's a little bit different. And so that just got us super jazzed up about entrepreneurship.
Wow. Nick, what did you think of this whole idea from the get-go?
I was all in. I remember Omar, we both went back to school for our senior year of college, and Omar called me up and said, hey, I'm writing a business plan for College Hunks Hauling Junk. I'm going to put it into an entrepreneurship competition. And I was like, you're going to win. And it won first prize out of about 150 entries. We graduated, actually got regular jobs for a very brief period of time. And I remember emailing Omar, hey, what's our timeline for starting this business? He emailed me all capital letters, my timeline's right now, ! Let's do this. So we got some skeptical looks from people when we said we were going to quit our jobs after college to haul junk and move furniture full time. They were like, "You're going to quit your jobs to do what? Haul junk, and it's going to be called what? College hunks? Are you throwing away your degree to start a trash business? Is that really a good idea?" And back in those days, shows like Shark Tank and the notion of starting a business weren't as commonplace. They were seen as very risky and dangerous to try to pursue because the odds were against startups. And so we wanted to try to defy those odds. And we always tell the story when we first started, we would be doing all the work ourselves. So we would be driving the trucks, answer the phone, hauling the junk. And we went out and obtained an 800 number, but it was still routed to our cell phone. So we put the 800 number on the back of the truck, and people would call to complain about driving. One of us would be in the driver's seat answering the phone saying, "We'll fire those guys when they get back to the office. Thanks for reporting that to us." So, probably as Omar mentioned, did every job, in the business from the very beginning.
So Nick, just as a point of reference, like what year is this about?
So 03 was the cargo van summer. 04 was the business plan competition. 05 was when we officially declared ourselves in business full time. So 2005 up in Washington, D.C., we had one truck. We would park it at one of our parents' houses. And I think we were still living at our respective parents' houses at the time as well.
So where does franchising come into the whole play here?
So franchising came into play when it was always in the business plan. How to do it, where to do it, why to do it, unknown. But I had a buddy that went to University of Miami with me. He was in the business school. And as he was watching the business unfold in DC, he said, "Hey, if you ever open a franchise, I'll open one in Orlando." And so we're like, "Hey, we got one open. So let's hurry up and get all the documents and legal stuff done so we can start opening and selling franchises." And that's what we did. I think 08, 09 is when we declared ourselves open for franchising, and way too early. Didn't have probably the systems and people that we needed, but opened that first one in Orlando and just kind of grew very slow between 2008 to probably 2015. And then 2015 is when we really hit a tipping point.
Sure. And so many of us, we didn't know anything about franchising, right? When we started out.
Yeah. So the other thing that I remember from those early days when we were doing all the work ourselves, we started to burn out a little bit. And so we had this vision of being a national brand, but we just didn't have the knowledge of how to do it. And one of our mentors recommended to us a book called The Eth Revisited by Michael Gerber, kind of the franchisor, entrepreneur handbook. And we read it, and it was like a light bulb went off for us because it felt like it was written about us. It was talking about how to work on the business, not in it, creating systems and processes for your business to scale to the next level. And so when we read that, it kind of validated, I think, Omar's early idea and indication of wanting to become a franchise. As Omar mentioned, we really didn't know what to do. So we went to some International Franchise Association conferences. We met some franchisors, but I think and some consulting groups as well. But I think we always had this perhaps naive, maybe glamorized view of how easy it was going to be. We didn't recognize, how many wounds and how long the cavern was going to be to have to cross to be able to get to the point where we are today. Right. But that learning curve was very steep. But once we dove in, there was like no turning back.
No, there is no turning back. You don't have no choice.
Yeah, I mean, just like Nick said, it was jumping off the airplane and
right.
figuring out the parachute on the way down.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the book, The E-Myth, I remember he mentioned it to me, and I'm reading it after a day of hauling junk, and I was covered in mud, and I'm like, oh man, this is really about us. And that whole idea of working on the business, creating the systems, I think it plays perfectly to franchising.
Right. And not to mention, you started franchising right during the start of the recession.
That's another good point.
If you were going to pick a time to franchise a home services business of anything, the start of the housing downturn probably wasn't the best time to do it. But as we reflect back, it probably was the best thing that could have happened to us because it forced us to become resilient, gritty, persevere, persistent, like basically all the things you hear about are intangibles in entrepreneurship. We had no choice. We felt like we were dragging an anchor through the sand. And, when we first started the business, all you had to do was park the truck out with a sign in front of it and the phone started ringing. But then once the housing market shifted, we had to get a lot more resourceful and strategic with how we made the phone ring.
All right. So we're starting out with franchising. And how did you get, besides your Orlando franchisee, how did you find your first 10 or so? I mean, that's probably the number 2 question I get from emerging franchisors?
Certainly some PR. PR was a big one for us.
We were on the very first episode of the very first season of Shark Tank in 2009. So that kind of helped put our brand on the map. PR was a little bit more effective back then than it is now, because back then there wasn't the social media and just, getting bombarded with so many different messages and content as there is today. But brokers,
yeah.
word of mouth.
Yeah, it was a little bit of everything. There wasn't one specific
website portal, franchise portals.
So you get one or two from PR, one or two from some pay-per-click advertising, or one from a broker, and just very linear growth. I think we were opening 6 to 8 a year for 6 years, and then one year was like 40. So it was,
it was a breakthrough. You push against the wall long enough, eventually you're going to stop pushing, or the wall's going to move. And finally the wall started moving, and that momentum, I think, was real. And funny story about that first franchisee, though, that Omar went to college with, is he didn't have the cash at the time to buy the franchise. And so he traded us land in Central Florida that we had no use for. Still, we have no use for to this day.
If you want some land, we got you, man.
I don't think it's appreciated in value, since 20 years, 15 years ago or whatever. But that was, in those early days of franchising, it was like we needed to sell franchises. So we needed to get them awarded as best we could.
Right. Well, since there's so many folks that listen that are emerging franchisors, and they heard that little story here, how you got your first 10, they're like, yeah, but things are different now, right? They might say, so if you guys were to start a brand new concept, knowing what you know today, and times have changed, how do you think you'd sell your first 10 to 12?
Networking, probably influencers.
Yeah, I think the influence,
social media.
It's easier said than done, but I see these guys and gals on Instagram that are top 5 businesses that withstand a recession, or these businesses never go bankrupt, and it's a lot of content around that, and TikTok, I guess. But I guess that's also easier said than done, because if it was that easy, we'd be doing it also. So it's tough. It's a different time. When we started, you would put an ad in the yellow pages. Because we started 05, Facebook started, I think, 04. So social media was just starting, Google pay-per-click and search engine marketing was just starting. Social media was very, very new. So the PR, the blocking and tackling, like the brokers, that all really worked. Now it's a very crowded marketplace.
Yeah.
A lot.
Also, honestly, if we were to start something fresh, I would think tapping into your customer base, because your customer base is going to be a fan of the service or the brand. And, whereas ours may not work because we were territory based, but if it were a retail concept or something like that, they might have a friend or a cousin or, an uncle or whatever that it's in another market that might want to kind of carry the torch of being the first franchise. But those early days of franchising were probably the most difficult. I equate it to probably more difficult than having kids, to be honest with you. And I've got 4 kids, and every one of those is, sleepless nights. But when you're starting a franchise, it's tough.
What would you guys say was one of the biggest challenges you had when you were starting out, and what did you learn from it?
For me, would be just kind of fighting through the housing market downturn. That it was the timeline of how long it took to scale the franchise system, how many franchises we really had to have it be at scale was probably the most challenging thing, and not being able to afford the resources, the people, the personnel, the software systems that were going to be able to help elevate the company faster. So it was a very kind of slow growth grind. And then in those early days as a franchisor, we were way more dependent on each and every franchise owner, and so there's a little bit of a leverage challenge there. Franchise owner gets big and kind of thinks he or she knows more than the brand or more than the founders, and so there's some friction there that was a little bit challenging.
Sure, that makes perfect sense to me. Omar, what are some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. I would say we were always chasing growth. The brand was always a little bit bigger than the stake behind it.
What do you mean by that?
That we had the brand was, from our very first truck, people were like, "Are you guys a franchise? I see you everywhere." And the brand was always bigger than, I think, the business.
Okay.
And so we were always we had to put the systems in place. We didn't have the revenue model, the business model, the training systems. We couldn't afford the people at the time that could put those systems in place. So we were always a little bit behind the 8 ball. And then it, sort of comes together, call it 2015, where all of a sudden we had the system and the sizzle. We had the brand and the meat behind it that proved it. And that's where, the unit economics of the franchisees come into play. Successful franchisees is going to be what sells more franchisees.
Mm-hmm. Did you guys bootstrap the company yourselves starting out?
Yeah.
We did. Yeah. The only outside capital was really just for the vehicle loans and, some real estate when we first bought our first office, a few years into the business.
That's awesome. Yeah, I did the same thing, and I have no regrets, though. I think starting out now, if we were starting a brand, could we do what we all did in the 2000s?
I wouldn't want to.
I wouldn't want to. I'm glad I did it. It taught us how to run a business, how to do it frugally, how to manage a budget, how to kind of play Moneyball. But I don't think I could do that twice. I think it's something that you do once, you prove yourself, and then you go raise capital if you do it a second time. Because this hair loss and
I know
all that stuff, that's a bootstrap business.
It's real.
You know what book I wish we had read in the early days is Shelley Sun's book from Bryce Sarkar. It's called Grow Smart, Risk Less. And because she started around the time we did, but obviously it was a rocket ship of a success story. But her book really kind of lays out the blueprint of what a franchisor looks like at sort of each stage, getting your first franchises, how many franchises you need. And then obviously, your book is very relevant as well. That didn't exist back then. Mm-hmm. So I think that those would have been very helpful. Some very franchise specific best practices.
Yeah, we didn't really have a lot of those resources when we were starting.
We didn't have podcasts like this either. I mean, it was the IFA. I mean, the IFA, to its credit, had a lot of good resources, but it was still kind of figuring it out on your own type of thing.
Plus, I don't know about you, but I didn't feel like when I would go to an IFA event that I really fit in because I would go to these conferences and I'm among the big boys.
Yeah, you got McDonald's and then
and then us.
Like, and how do we get there?
What do we need to do? And they were obviously able to afford, a management team that we couldn't afford. We were definitely not royalty sufficient. And it was all about how do I keep the lights on? It was about how do I sell more franchises and how do I build the systems at the same time? I mean, it was all what you mentioned earlier, Nick, about the Eth Revisited. It was all about how do I build the systems and processes while I try to keep things going.
Yeah. And I'll say two things that were, I would say, critical building blocks for us was number one, where we made the conscious sort of intentional decision to become purpose-driven and values-based. And I know it's kind of cliche to talk about your core values and being a purpose-driven organization, but we had gone to enough conferences and read enough books to realize that companies and organizations that withstand the test of time are ones that are not just chasing money or economics, but they're chasing an impact. And so we created our company purpose, our core values, and set those in place. And I think that started attracting a lot of passion and energy of franchise owners and team members. And then a few years into that, we realized that we were actually missing a key ingredient of accountability, performance-based accountability, because we started saying, well, without margin, there's no mission. So we have to be able to perform and hold people accountable to the results. And we've got to have a vibrant, welcoming company culture. And I think those two sort of levers pulled simultaneously is what fueled the momentum to what we are today.
I think that makes perfect sense to me. And I do see your brand as a brand with great passion behind it. There is a lot of meaning. There is a lot of, how do I put it? There's a lot of energy with the people that are part of your team, whether I see it on social media or, at a franchise conference. And that's obviously, indicative on how you guys have built this company.
It has to be. It's a hard job. It's moving, death, divorce. Those are the most stressful things in someone's life. And we're going into people's homes that are going through one of the most stressful things in their lives. We're doing a job that you wouldn't do for your best friend.
Right.
So,
even for pizza and beer.
Right. Even for pizza and beer. So it's, a little bit of organized chaos. And the way I describe it is, and it's probably similar for many franchises, is like tech companies are run a certain way, but our types of businesses are run like, in my opinion, a football team. You got the head coaches, you got the linebacker coach, the defensive coordinator. We've got the headsets on. Our job is to motivate the team. Our job is to recruit the team members. Our job is to follow the system and run the playbook and get the people on the bus and get the wrong people off the bus. So it's like very much a sports mentality. Whereas, if you're a fintech company, you can have 8 people in a room programming. It's not the same. It's very people dependent. In order to get people on the team to really buy in, they have to have that higher purpose.
Yeah, I think that is spot on, especially when you talk about the team members, because I don't know about you guys, but do you feel like you were, I don't want to say the quality, because we've all had really terrific people that have worked for us. How has the staffing evolved from the time you started out and you were hiring to a few years back?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the dynamics of the team evolve and the personnel evolves as the business grows. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that is a core value in our organization is building leaders. And so the idea is that we want to always be getting better, Omar and I as the founders, but we also want to make sure that everybody else in the organization has that same level of focus on improving themselves. But we also want to be realistic that doesn't mean everybody gets promoted as the business grows, because, for somebody to move from the minor leagues in baseball to the major leagues in baseball, you got to be the very best player at the minor league level, and there's got to be an opening at the major league level. Mm-hmm. And so we make that analogy very clear and transparent that not everybody's going to move up to be the major league executive. Some people might hit a ceiling, and that's okay. And maybe they're happy in remaining in the seat, or maybe they graduate to go do something else. And so over time, we've had team members continue to evolve and grow with the organization. Our current brand president started out as our financial controller, and even before that, he was a undergraduate college student doing a case study about our company before he joined the organization. And then we've got, guys on the truck who have gone on to own franchises, but not everybody can make that leap. And so there are people that started off with the organization that either loved it so much they wanted to go own their own franchise, or they moved on to go do other things as the business evolved and grew.
Business, just like sports, is about beating the odds. For every 100 applicants, one becomes a truck captain. For every 100 truck captains, one might become an ops manager. For every 100 of those, maybe one will become a franchise partner. So it's all about beating the odds. And the early days, it's like Pee Wee soccer, right? Where Nick and I are chasing the ball around.
Everybody's running with us.
Everyone's running with us, and then you kind of evolve to high school sports. We got our plays, and then all of a sudden, I'd like to consider we're like Alabama football, or I guess the New England Patriots aren't the
what
team
they used
anymore.
to be.
What they used to be,
right,
but you got Nick Saban, and you've got the system, and you've got the brand, and you've got the coaching staff, the coaching tree, and all of that.
Yeah, I think that, the analogy that Omar just described is spot on. Is, in the early days, it was kind of managed chaos, and over time it professionalizes, and the identity and the culture remains the same, but the professionalism and the structure and the discipline continues to elevate. Mm-hmm. And that's the only way. If the business is going up in a upward direction, the people have to be moving at the same trajectory. Otherwise, they're going to be pulling the business downwards, and you can't have that.
And how difficult was that to make some of those decisions and changes? Did you go through a period of time where your team leadership, not even leadership, but the bench had to evolve?
It's both, because there's that, but then you also go and try to hire the high paid coach, right? That you think is going to just be able to come in and put the plays together, and that doesn't work either. So it's both. It's managing, like, you can't just buy your way out of it, and you can't just promote your way to it. So it's finding that medium, and that's where I think as founders or visionaries, you have to be extremely diligent about who you let onto the team, and then if they're not the right person, moving them off.
Yeah, but I think probably the hardest part, Frank, is when you have to part ways with somebody that just passionately cares about the organization, but the organization has outgrown them, or the seat has outgrown them. And we try to be very direct and candid, because it's not doing them or the organization any favors by trying to keep them in a seat that they're no longer able to thrive in. And so we try to have very objective, candid conversations that are come from a point of compassion. One of the things we like to say is, we're cold on the numbers. Numbers are black and white, but we still want to be warm on people and compassionate about our people, and help them be in the best position to win, which may in some cases be no longer on this team if the team has outgrown them. So the people decisions are probably the hardest part of any organization. And you look at the professional sports teams they're wrong 50% of the time with their draft picks, and they can watch the person play on the field and have all their stats and do all these personality profiles on top of it. And we're having to go off of a resume, an interview, a reference check. And we've, brought in some other tools like predictive index and things of that nature as well to help us, identify the right fits.
Yeah, and to your point, Omar, you can't buy your way in because we've seen some of the highest payroll, for example, in Major League Baseball, and those teams didn't even make the playoffs. So
it's players, it's coaching, it's
so
fit,
much
culture
involved.
fit.
But okay, when did you know, because you guys were growing kind of slowly at first, when did you know, like, we can start scaling this thing quicker, like we can start turning it up? We've got the things in place. Was there some sort of tipping point for you to realize that?
I think it was the point where we brought franchise development in-house because actually we hadn't mentioned that yet. But when we first started, we were outsourcing our fran dev. So we had a broker, not an independent broker that was commission only. And then we had a third party kind of development organization that was helping us sell the franchises. But we were getting to a point where that third party development organization wasn't sort of ingrained in our culture and our day-to-day. They didn't really know our franchise owners. They didn't really know, our support team. And so they were sort of selling, I guess, the sizzle, as Omar called it. And then once we were able to bring it in-house, there was a little bit of a lull, but then I think it just kind of, it slingshotted upwards because we kind of had all the pieces of the puzzle marching in the same direction.
I agree. I think it was that. I think also the unit economics. So the combination of those two things, having profitable franchisees and then having the development team that could then blow it out of the water. And that's when those two things came together. That's when the tipping point happened.
Oh yeah. Now, franchise development, do you guys still have in-house fran dev?
We do.
All right. So you're starting a franchise tomorrow, just knowing what you know, you're bootstrapping it. Maybe you have 5-6 franchises. Do you do fran dev in-house? Do you use an FSO? What do you do?
I think if we're bootstrapping it, I would probably use an FSO, franchise sales organization, because you're paying on a commission basis. You're, on aggregate, you're going to overpay, but it's okay because they're helping you fill the boat with qualified franchise owners, hopefully. And then if you can get to a point where then you can then afford bringing it in-house. But if you were trying to bring it in-house from the beginning, and then if it fails, that's going to be a costly mistake.
But if you had investors and cash wasn't an issue, you would prefer in-house fran dev, you think?
I think so. If you've got the right people, the right culture, and the right leadership, and as Omar said, the right unit economics.
What do you think?
This is where you need the FSO sponsor just to, it's like, hey, rep them right here.
Right. What do you think?
I agree. Yeah, I think if I was bootstrapping, the FSO for sure, because it's low risk. Yes, you're going to overpay. But if you can truly, if money wasn't an option and you could really do what you wanted, then sure, you'd want to have an in-house team that's all in on your culture and your system.
But I think that in the early days of franchise sales, it really does boil down to the culture and to some degree the sizzle of what it is that you have to offer. We had a catchy name, bright colors, good PR, purpose-driven, values-based organization. People wanted to be a part of that. And then the rocket fuel, as Omar mentioned, is when our franchise owners started really making real money, buying vacation homes, putting their kids through college, buying that, luxury car, and prospects wanted to be a part of that. So it was a combination of, okay, that's a great organization, great culture, and I can make a pretty amazing living doing that. That's a recipe for rapid growth.
What about on the broker side? When we were all starting out in the 2000s, it was easy for brokers to want to work with us. Now, because of all the brands that are out there, it's harder for a startup.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when we first started trying to get into the broker networks, we almost went broke paying to be part of their conferences, and then paying to be part of their network, and then paying to try to attract their attention by buying the steak dinners or sending them gifts and all this sort of, and it took quite a while for us to get any of their attention. If I were an early stage franchisor, I don't think that you could afford that, because the brokers are going to go where the deals are, path of least resistance. They're going to go where they know deal flow is getting done, either because they've gotten them done before, because their peers are getting them done, and they don't want to also show something that's brand new if they don't know for sure it's going to work out well. And so those would be my thoughts there.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree. I think it's a necessary evil. Not to say that the brokers are evil, but it's something you sort of have to do. But they're taking a big chunk of it. They're not necessarily ingrained with the culture, but if you're starting out, I think you want to try to find ways to stand out away from the brokers. Plus, it's gonna be hard to get their attention, to Nick's point. It's hard to break through.
It takes quite the investment today with the broker groups to get, not only for them to get their attention, but for them to thoroughly understand your concept.
Yeah, right. But I still, I mean, when somebody comes up to me and tells me they're thinking about buying a franchise, some type of franchise, I oftentimes will refer them to consultants or brokers, because if somebody's thinking about what they want to buy and they don't, all they're doing is online research, it'd be nice to have somebody kind of walk them through and show them a bunch of different options that meet their criteria, personality wise and investment wise, and those sorts of things. So it's I think it's an important piece, and the brokers, especially the ones that do a great job, spend a ton of time investing in lead generation and trying to present the right opportunity for their clients, not just whatever's going to pay them the most commission.
I want to move on to when you guys kind of got to this tipping point, though, because you're saying early Omar, that you're selling 6 franchises, 6, 7, you get to 40, and then what happened? Why did it happen? How did it happen?
Yeah. Well, I think it was a combination of the unit economics, the franchisees that were buying the vacation homes and were making money and happy. Bringing the franchise development in-house, all of a sudden those two things collide. And then now we have the money to be able to professionalize our team. Nick mentioned our current brand president, who came on as a financial controller and moved up to now essentially running the company. So it was a perfect storm of a lot of good things happening that all came together. And we followed the traction model, the EOS model. That is also another thing I'd have to sort of add into the mix. All of those things combined is really what was the rocket fuel for the brand.
Yeah, I think it's that building of the momentum, the Jim Collins flywheel. When in the early days we're pushing it, it's inching forward ever so slightly, and eventually it starts making a full, rotation, but it's still requiring a ton of effort, ton of energy, time, money, bandwidth, and then eventually it starts to move a little bit faster, and then all of a sudden it's kind of spinning on its own, and then as the founder, we can kind of help facilitate the growth, but we're not having to push every single lever. Yeah.
Why do you guys think so many franchisors start out and they exit? They don't stay with it.
The quote that stands in my head is persistence. The movie The Founder, about the Ray Kroc, founder of McDonald's, I think it was played by Michael Keaton. He's got this monologue towards the end of the movie where he talks about, the key to success is persistence. And that's obviously the original kind of blue chip franchise system that we can always, reflect on from a century ago. And I think, franchisors maybe get into it kind of like we did, with a little bit of, naive about how easy it's going to be, or, hey, my, local business is tough, but if I franchise, I'll be able to collect royalties and it's passive income. And, but then they get into it and they realize, okay, this is hard. We're not making real money until we get 50 or 100 franchises. We're having all these headaches and friction with our early stage franchisees. And so, maybe they just don't have the resilience or persistence to push through.
I mean, it's exactly that. I think business is hard. That's what it comes down to. It's very, very hard. Not to overdo the sports analogies, but they're looking at an NBA team. For every one of those guys that are on the team, there's 10,000 others that didn't make it. They might have had the talent. They might have, had everything for them, but they just either weren't in the right place at the right time, or had the wrong coach, or a million things can derail.
One bad decision.
One bad decision. Yeah. So at the end of the day, business is hard. Franchising is harder. You have to be focused in, first off, I think, proving the unit economics. So a lot of folks get ahead of their skis trying to open franchises. The one thing we had going for us is our corporate store was profitable. So we weren't opening franchises without the cash flow of that one corporate store in DC. So you've got to prove it out, at least in one market. I'd say even open 2 or 3 markets as corporate entities, and then prove it, and then start franchising. Don't start franchising unless you have that cash flow.
Omar, that can't be overstated enough. I think too many franchisors, right? They start out and they may have one location, maybe they sell it. I did that. I don't recommend that. But then all of a sudden the pressure becomes selling franchises to keep the lights on.
We were self-funded, but what funded us was that location in DC was the bank for us.
Yeah.
I mean, that was
that funded our personal lives.
Everything.
That funded the franchisor entity until it was sustainable.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
So how many company-owned locations did you have in the beginning? Did you have
The beginning one.
You just had the one.
Yeah.
Did you open up additional company-owned locations?
Today we have 4.
Yeah.
And then we do have a thesis of expanding and opening additional corporate locations in select geographies in the next coming years.
Okay.
Now that we've got some infrastructure to support that. But in the beginning, it was just the one. We put a GM in place to kind of run it and oversee the day-to-day while we focus a lot of our energy, most of our energy on bringing in new franchises and supporting those new franchises and bringing in the team members to help do that as well.
What is your thoughts on the balance between company-owned locations and franchising and the franchisor-franchisee relationship when you start opening company-owned locations?
You know, I think that you want to treat the independent, or you want to treat the corporate locations no differently really than a franchise location as far as the expectation of performance, as far as the unit economics,
Paying royalties.
as far as paying the royalties out of it. And so what you really want to achieve in franchising is aligned interests. And so if there's conflict of interest, or in some cases even perceived conflict of interest, that's something that needs to be kind of addressed and kind of nipped in the bud, or at least evaluated to make sure it doesn't manifest into something bigger. But I think we've leveraged our corporate stores as a net benefit for the franchise system, because if we're wanting to pilot test something, we can pilot test it in a corporate store, prove out the success of it, and then present the results to the franchise system to say, hey guys, we spent all this money on these things here. It's working. Now we're going to recommend that you guys do it as well. And it's not going to cost you all the learning curve that we invested, the R&D that we invested. So I think that's where the benefit could come through.
Yeah, I would agree. I think in the early days, we were very bullish that we didn't want to have any corporate stores, aside from the one. But over the years, we've started, I don't want to say make it a 180, but we're certainly shifting the thesis that having a good number of corporate stores is actually a net positive, because of all the reasons that Nick mentioned, because that it increases the enterprise value of the brand. It's a great way to our building leaders story to be able to move people into those positions, and it just gives you a great sort of control of the brand and the business.
Yeah, I think there, while there's mixed reviews on having that dual strategy, I do agree with you guys. I think that there is benefit there, especially using it as potentially a farm system of raising talent, because especially if you're trying to really promote within, I think that offers you the opportunity to do that, where people are firsthand working in those territories. Strategically, I guess, deciding on where to put these company-owned locations, and that's I'll leave it up to you guys. We'll leave it out of the show. I did the company-owned thing a little bit with I9 Sports. Didn't work out perfectly for us, but I see that it definitely has merit for sure.
Yeah, I think the key is as you just described, location and personnel. Who's going to be running it and where is it based? But in your business model and our business model, it's a little bit trickier because we don't have a 4-wall retail store that people are coming into, and so it's not as simple as just dropping a manager in there to manage those 4 walls and the people within it. In our business, we're sending our people out in a truck with wheels, out into the community, going to people's homes. In your business, you're going out to fields and courts and, running leagues. And so there's a little bit more variability in the model, where in some cases having somebody who's an owner actually, you would think, has more skin in the game or more of a vested interest in how it performs. But if we can, which we're attempting to do in our corporate models, create a similar owner-like mentality with our managers, we think it could work out.
Yeah. The one statistic that drives me crazy, that's been around probably since before we all started franchising, is the 84% of all franchisors never get to 100 units. For at least 20 years, that stat has never improved. Why do you think that is? Why do you think so many doors don't get to 100 units?
I was at a franchise IFA event years ago because he has since passed away, but I ran into Fred DeLuca, the founder of Subway, And I was telling him about our business, and I think he had seen one of our trucks before and had heard a little bit of our story and was congratulating us. And I think we had like 19 or 20 franchises at the time. And he said to me, he said, listen, most franchisors, they start selling a few franchises and they start spending too much money and they run out of business or run out of money and run out of business. Don't do that. And so obviously I took that to heart and said, well, we're starting to sell franchises and look, our balance sheet is growing a little bit. Our bank account is growing a little bit, but Fred DeLuca said, don't go spend that money yet because we're not, where we need to be. And so that could be a reason why a lot of franchisors don't make it to 100 is because maybe they get a little bit impatient and start overspending ahead of their skis and aren't budget minded along the way to become royalty self-sufficient.
Yeah, I mean, 100 is that magic number. I mean, that's when certainly the economics of the franchisor greatly changed. What prevents it is, again, it's not managing a system with 50 to 100 franchises is very different than 10, right? Like when it's the 10, they'll be calling you at 8 o'clock at night. You're talking to them.
Oh yeah.
But you're running royalties manually.
Yeah. When there's 60, now you need to be able to it's not just the relationship with them, it's putting the system in place that's going to allow them to be successful. And I think that's a whole other skill set.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a level of sophistication and professionalism that has to be in place for you to be able to support getting to 100.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. I think the financial big piece is a big part of it. And the pressure maybe of not being well capitalized, of maybe not having a company owned location, so you're trying to sell franchises. And then the other thing is maybe we're selling franchises to not the right people. And if we sell too many of those early on, we can't catch up, right? Culturally.
Yeah, that'll come back to bite you. And we made those mistakes. I mean, some of the things that we were warned about was don't sell too much territory. Don't use the fog a mirror technique, where meaning if they can fog a mirror and write a check, then you sell them a franchise. We were told not to do that, but it's very easy to think you're not supposed to do that. But if you're needing and relying on franchise fees to kind of keep the lights on and meet payroll, it's hard to sort of bridge that decision tree. But your point, if you get too many of the wrong franchise owners in, or you sell too much territory and people can't handle it or develop it, it could certainly backfire.
Yeah.
I think having the right team in place, because as entrepreneurs and founders, we're always going to see the best in people. So it's not even that, hey, we'd like the money, but like someone comes in, we think he can make it, or we think she can make it. But then having that team in place that's going to say, hey, hold on, like I don't think this person is going to be a fit, and they're going to push back on you because of X, Y, Z, and starting to have those conversations and have that conflict within the team, that's going to be what sets you up for success. So it's a lot on the founder, I think. The founder needs to be able to step away from 0 to 25. Yeah, the founder's there, you're having the conversations, you're selling it to everybody, but from 25 to 100, now you have to step back and bring in the team that's going to hold you accountable to what you need to be doing and vice versa.
Yeah. We started evaluating for culture fit and potential, skill set fit. So, could this person be successful in our type of business model, and are we going to enjoy working with this person? Do they meet embody our core values and align with our core values and our vision and purpose?
Yeah, I got caught up in liking people.
Yeah.
I'm like, I really like this guy. Like, I want him to win. And well, in our business, he likes sports. And of course, I came to find out very quickly that whether you know anything about sports has nothing to do with if you're going to be a successful entrepreneur, right?
Right.
The same thing with moving. Where we've all moved before doesn't mean I am an expert in the moving business.
Yeah, the good news, nobody likes moving, so it's like we can just get rid of that right away. But yeah, it's the same thing. It's you meet people, you're like, I like them. I
like them.
They're energetic. Whatever it is, you know. There's been countless conversations we've had where like, that guy can't make it, nobody can. Sometimes that person
doesn't. Then sometimes he doesn't make it, right?
Yeah.
And we're like, wow, I really thought, but we don't know what's going on in their personal lives, right? This thing's going on. One other thing, I have to go back to the territory. I love that. Nick, you mentioned about giving away too much territory. To this day, when I read an FDD, if I see a franchisor giving away a lot of territory, by the way, I want to preface by saying I did this, so I know I made the same mistake. Basically, how I read it as, it's a confidence issue. is my franchisee going to make it? If I give them enough real estate, they have enough runway to make mistakes. And I did that. I gave away enormous territories because I thought, oh my God, how many basketball courts there are, and what if that school says no, and that city says no, and that city says no? Like, I gave way too much land away, and then as the years went on, I shrunk it down. It was like franchisees were succeeding. My confidence level went up, territory size got smaller. Did you guys do any of the same thing?
Yeah, 100%, probably identical evolution that you just described. It's way too much territory in the beginning. Rubber stamp approved people's request to expand.
Right.
And now we've got a very disciplined expansion criteria that's objective, not subjective. And we've taken Omar and I's emotions out of it, and we let the team view the metrics and people's criteria for expansion. But we don't sell more than one zone out of the gates.
That's good.
So somebody's got to prove themselves in one zone before they can add additional. And I think there's that confidence level that the franchisor evolves to, where the model starts to prove out. You get this critical mass where you're not reliant on, the next sale to keep the lights on.
Right. When my franchisee in Honolulu, the reason why he has all of Honolulu is because back in 2005, I said, nobody's ever going to call us again from Hawaii. Just give them the whole thing.
Sell them the whole thing.
Yeah. Why did I do that?
Yeah.
And he's been a huge success, of course. And but that was the short-sightedness of an early franchisor. You just don't know, right? You can't see that far in the future.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
You have no idea. I've always wondered how you two guys have worked together, though. Like, how have you divvied up the responsibilities? And more importantly, how have you maybe put strategic differences aside and come together to grow this beast?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, you hear all the stories of business partnerships that don't work. I think we were lucky in the fact that our personalities are similar but different. So there was just some luck in the fact that we were friends, had similar values, vision, but we also had skill sets that were different. In the early days, it was, we divided based on what we probably liked doing, what we were better at. So I might do a little more of the digital marketing, and Nick was more sales and finance, in the numbers and helping with the franchise sales. But the real, I think, shift was the entrepreneurial operating system, Traction, where it was sort of the second book that spoke to us. E-Myth was the first one where it was like, oh, wow, this really is speaking to us. And then the EOS book, Nick recommended it to me, and same thing. I read it. I was like, wow, this is us. And, it talks about the visionary seat and the integrator seat. And I think we realized at that moment that neither of us were an integrator or wanted to be an integrator. So that was the light bulb moment that we needed to find one. And so now today, I'd say we sit in the co-visionary seat with our integrator being Roman, who's our brand president, and we follow their meeting cadence, and we sit through these, what we call the level 10 same page meeting with where we come to the table with a laundry list of items and then sort of talk them through. And Roman is our, sometimes he's got to be on the play like judge or marriage counselor or something like that. But we get through it kind of using the model, I think.
Yeah, I mean, Omar hit it on the head. I think our friendship was a great foundation where we, you hear every high school boy's dream is like going to business with like his best buddy.
Absolutely.
And, but then to Omar's point, a lot of times they fall apart or their friendship suffers as a result. And so I think our vision, values have always been in alignment. Neither one of us really ever takes things personally. So, we would have arguments and then just kind of keep it moving and get right back to business and friendship. Like there was never any resentment or distrust or anything along those lines. So I think just like any relationship, communication is important, appreciation of what each other brings to the table, and kind of also acceptance of each other's faults and flaws, right? Like I probably drive Omar crazy with some of my obsessive compulsiveness. Omar would drive me crazy in the early days with some of his kind of laid back things are going to just fall into place. And, and then we would yell at each other about it, but then we would just kind of get right back to business. And the best part, I think, about the partnership has been able to really celebrate the wins, with somebody that's a true friend, but then also be able to kind of have somebody to, hunker down with as things are tough. I mean, COVID was tough. This climate we're in right now is, we don't know what it's going to shake out as. And so having somebody that you're kind of in the corner with and, been through ups and downs together with is beneficial for us as well.
That's beautiful.
I tell that to pretty much any business owner I speak to that's a single founder. I tell them you're in the most difficult position because it's just you by yourself. And like, yes, you hear the horror stories of business partnerships, but like, you don't have anyone to talk to at the end of the day. You don't have someone pushing you to make that decision that you've been putting off. You don't have that person to confide in. So you're literally on this mountain by yourself.
True.
So like, that's a tough position.
Yeah. And you know, what's funny is I wish we could go back and read our text string from like the early days and up until now, because there's, you know, stuff pops into one of our head and we just will fire off a text to the other person. You know, might be a stress text. It might be an idea text. Sometimes we're arguing with each other. We forget that Roman, our brand president, is on the text string as well. So he's just kind of sitting, you know, waiting for us to settle down so we can, you know, actually talk about something productive. But yeah, again, it gets back to, I think, our comfortability with each other as friends, that none of it, you know, none of the negativity ever bothers us enough to make an impact. And, you know, all the upside is, you know, still stuff we get excited about.
That's cool. I mean, you guys solved the lonely at the top syndrome.
Yeah.
I would imagine too, back at least the early days when you guys were a smaller operation, it had to be like when we had, you know, with our kids know to go to mom or dad for certain things. I bet your staff knew, you go to Omar for that. Do not go to Nick, and vice versa. Did you feel being played against one another sometimes?
100%. It's like, go ask mom, go ask dad. All right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
that definitely happened for sure. Or sometimes they would come to me and be like, Omar said this was cool. And I'd be like, Omar said that? And they haven't even talked to Omar yet.
Oh, I imagine so. So what's like what's the direction for you guys now moving forward? I'd love to hear more about like the vision of where you want to take the company and how big is big?
Yeah. So, you know, I think the nice thing that we're at a new inflection point for our business, quite frankly, where we are not coming from a place of scarcity, where like, I think when we first started the business, we always had this dream of being $100 million system-wide business and, you know, being a profitable enterprise and, you know, winning these awards and accolades. And so like, you know, now we can look back and say, well, we've done all those things we set out to do. And, you know, it was hard, but now we're at a place of kind of abundance where we can say, you know, what else can we achieve to maximize our potential as a business, as a brand, as professionals and leaders, and make a positive impact along the way in doing so. And so, you know, we're close to 300 million system-wide in revenue today. And, you know, we don't see any reason why we can't 10X that, you know, in the next 10 years. And we don't know exactly how. There'll be some other business acquisitions perhaps at some point, or extensions of the current brand offering. But we think in doing so, we can make 10X more impact than we've made up to this point as well.
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, I think there's a lot of meat on the bone. Hauling is a $20 billion industry, so there's still a lot of opportunity to go deeper in each one of our territories and certainly add more franchises. So pretty much what he said.
Yeah, you know what I really heard you say though, Nick, is that something happened with the mindset with you guys. You changed from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset. And that really didn't happen. We all know that did not happen because you brought in a lot more revenue, because if you have a scarcity mindset, that's who you are, right? I've been around people who, you know, multimillionaires who have still the scarcity mindset. What do you think changed for you guys? Like, how did you make this shift? Because that's really why the company exploded, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a combination of things. You know, we got married, we started having kids, so life events happened. We matured a little bit where it was no longer about trying to have. It was more so about, you know, what more can we produce for others and you know, achieve to maximize our potential. So it kind of took the edge off a little bit, where now we weren't playing to not lose, we were playing to win. And you can operate much more free that way, you know, and it's whether it's like playing sports without the mental pressure. You see them, the successful athletes, in the flow of things. And so, you know, I think that shift was gradual. Also, as we started to achieve, I saw people that had more than us that, you know, still had that scarcity mindset, like you said, that were just, you know, never fulfilled, never satisfied, didn't enjoy what they were doing. It seemed like there was just something else driving them. And I didn't want that to be me. I realized, you know, there's only so much runway left, so let's make it a very fulfilling one.
Who talks about the infinite game? It's Simon Sinek. So
yes.
It's like, that really spoke to me, is that we're playing the infinite game with College Hunks. You know, when we're long gone, I hope that those orange green trucks are still driving around, and there's people sitting in the driver's seats that are becoming leaders, right? And so it's that legacy of a brand that will hopefully stand the test of time. And so I always want to be involved with College Hunks. I know Nick does too, for as long as we possibly can, or as long as they'll have us. So it's just that commitment to the infinite of the brand.
You guys realized that the business was not about you anymore. Because anybody that says that you want these trucks to be around long after you and it's about legacy means they realize it's bigger than them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have an opportunity. We have made a significant impact in the lives of our franchise owners, team members, and the communities we serve. But we have, the bigger we get, the broader the impact, the greater the reach. And, our company purpose, we say, is move the world. And it's a double meaning that Omar came up with, which is not just about moving people physically, but moving people emotionally with our interactions, with the things that we're able to perform for them. And so the better our business can become, the better we can become as leaders, the better our people can become. It's this virtuous cycle that, makes things better. And, it always sounds sometimes a little bit cliche to say that, but it's true. One of the things that I always, emphasize to our team is when they see these orange and green trucks on the road, when people see these orange and green trucks, we want them to think, hey, for that moment, everything is okay. Like that brand represents that which is positive. And, obviously there's a lot of negativity right now going on. So we want to be sort of the shining light of positivity that, that as much as we can, as best we can.
Yeah, I get. Would you say that you're ultimately selling security and comfort?
Absolutely. Trust and care.
That's core values?
Yeah. Oh, it's one of it's the emotions that we want to elicit in our team members and our clients. Most importantly, anytime you choose a home service business, it's usually about trust. You're calling 911, right? You've got mold, you're calling 911 mold. If you've got junk, you're calling 911 junk. Anytime you invite strangers into your home, that's like an emergency. So our job is to relieve them of their stress and rescue them, for lack of a better word. So yeah, it's definitely about that.
What's been the biggest surprise that you guys have seen in franchising?
Maybe not biggest surprise, but something that it's been maybe a pleasant surprise is how supportive the franchise community is. And, there's now much more support out there for emerging franchises, and there's things like Springboard for early stage franchises, and things like this podcast and your book that helps educate franchises, big, small, new, old, on how to improve the model for its greatest impact. And it creates jobs, it creates economic impact, community impact. And we've seen firsthand how it impacts our franchise owners and their team members. But I think it's a very supportive community and a very unique model that hopefully can continue to flourish for a long time.
What's also interesting is that as much as the world has changed, franchising has stayed somewhat the same. It's the same principles, unit economics, franchise development, systems, people. Probably the thing that surprises me is that there hasn't been as much change. That what's worked 30, 40 years ago still works today.
Yeah, that was one of the big takeaways for me at Springboard. I know, Omar, I saw you there, is that I came away from Springboard with as much as things have changed, the foundation of franchising is exactly the same. Nothing has changed. Well, there's a lot more resources, a lot more technology. There's a lot more access than we had when we were starting out. But at the end of the day, it's still the same. It comes down to unit economics, right? And having the right culture, having the right team, all those things. Cool. If somebody was interested in being part of your system, how can they find out about you guys?
Our website, collegehunkshaulingJunk.com. They can check us out or learn about our franchise opportunities. That's probably the best way. Social media, we're on Instagram, @collegehunks is our company Instagram handle. So.
Nice. All right. Excellent. I've got to finish with one last thing, and I call it the tip jar. And this entire podcast has been one big tip jar. But let's say we have an entrepreneur who's looking to franchise their concept. Omar, what is the one piece of advice you're going to give him or her before they get started?
The one piece of advice, you got to have a vision. You got to put your vision on paper. So you have to be able to communicate that vision, believe in that vision, express it to that first team member or to your wife or spouse or, so it's got to start with the vision.
I think that's great. Nick, what do you got?
Yeah, so to piggyback on Omar's, he and I just recently went and saw Dave Chappelle's stand-up show here in Tampa, and one of his words of wisdom he gave the audience when he wasn't telling jokes was that the guy with the loudest dream usually has it come true. And so I think that kind of echoes Omar's point about having a vision and being able to share it loudly and clearly with everybody around you, especially your early hires, your early franchise owners, to want to be a part of that journey. But then I would say be patient for results and have urgency of effort. That's what I always preach to entrepreneurs, but franchising is no different. The results are going to come with time, but the effort has to be constantly, urgently, reinforced. And none of it happens overnight. We describe ourselves as a 20-year overnight success, but it's the compounding effect of the effort and the execution over time that ultimately produces the breakthrough results.
Guys, you are such an inspiration to franchisors and just entrepreneurs alike. And I just, it's amazing. I love seeing what you guys have done. You guys have done over the years. It's just incredible.
Likewise.
I just wish you all continued success. It's great seeing you both. Thank you so much for being on the show, and see you around.
Yeah. Thank you for the mentorship over the years.
Oh, thank you.
This is awesome.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Well, thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Thank you for tuning into the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. For additional insights, guest applications, and to stay connected, visit us at efbpodcast.com. The Emerging Franchise Brands podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent those of Emerging Franchise Brands, its host Frank Fiume, or Emerging Franchise Group, LLC. Any discussed franchise or investment opportunity requires thorough investigation, obtaining proper disclosure documents, and expert consultation before making any investment decisions. The podcast and its host do not offer professional advice or endorsements, and they hold no responsibility for actions, representations, accuracy, or consequential damages related to the podcast content.